profesorem Filipem Zimbardem jsme se setkali při jeho poslední návštěvě Prahy. Mluvili jsme spolu mimo jiné o tom, jak vychovávat naše děti tak, aby se dokázali ozvat proti nespravedlnosti, nebo o tom, co doopravdy dělá z člověka hrdinu. I heard you saying the story of your life when you were 5. You were half a year in a hospital in very heavy conditions.
Yeah.
And could you say just a little bit about this experience?
See, I grew up in poverty, meaning my family often had almost no food. And this is in America. But in those days, and some places even now, there were areas where only poor people lived. And typically it was an area where there were no jobs easily. My parents were uneducated. They never went to high school. So if you didn't go to school, there's very limited jobs. My family trade, my grandfather, uncles, were barbers. And my father was trained to be a barber. But he hated it because it was like, he felt like it's like being a servant. Mm-hmm. He wanted people to be a servant for him. He didn't want to. So one day he quit. He said, I don't want to work anymore. Well, you have a family of 6. You can't say you don't want to work. We got to eat. And so we in those days they call home relief. We went on social welfare, where they give you food, they give you clothes. It's humiliating. But he didn't care. He was happy, happy not to work at jobs he didn't like. But the problem when in those days, if you were poor, you lived in a toxic environment, meaning typically. Paint on the walls had lead. They used to put lead in paint. Mm-hmm. When it peeled off, it went into children's lungs. And people didn't know about it. There was asbestos in the air. In the streets, they used to have vendors come, and they used to have donkeys or horses with manure on the street. They'd leave it, would leave there for days or two. And of course, it would be germs. And this is where we lived as children. And in those days, many children developed contagious diseases. Yellow fever, polio, scarlet fever, tuberculosis, and then whooping cough. So I developed whooping cough and double pneumonia in both lungs. I was 5. And in those days, any child who had a contagious disease at first had to be kept home. And then if you didn't recover, you had to go, you were forced by law to go to a hospital. Mm-hmm. And in this hospital, the name was Willard Parker Hospital for children with contagious disease. All children, all disease. I think it was age as young as 2. Before 2, they could keep them up. So children 2 years old are there, up to maybe 16. I was 5. It was November 1938. And so I went in, I said, I had difficulty breathing. I figured if I go in, they're going to, you go to the doctor, they're going to give you medicine, you get well. In 1938, they had not yet invented penicillin. They had not yet invented sulfa drugs, which means there's no cure for any contagious disease. Nothing, 0. So you lie there, you're waiting to get medicine, injection, whatever. Nothing. The doctors come, they look at your chart, they take your temperature, high temperature, they go on. And if I close my eyes, I see a big hospital ward, hundreds of beds, just side by side, up and down. And of course, I close my eyes, listen, children are crying, little children, me, because you want your parents, because you're lonely, and you're in pain. I mean, with double pneumonia and whooping cough, I could barely breathe. I had to fight literally for every, and then the worst thing was when you had to eat breakfast, it was hard to digest food because, so I ate very little bit. I got really skinny. If you get skinny, you're weak. The weaker you get, the more you can die. And so, all you wanted was your parents to come and take you home, but you couldn't. And so visiting hours in this hospital was 1 hour on Sunday. And what did that mean? It means if your parents could come, they came to see you, and there was a big glass wall screen. And they had a telephone. And you're on this side, and you talk. Now, you couldn't get out of bed, so they move your bed against the wall. And so here's my bed, here's this one. So they can't make, I'm remembering maybe 4 beds. But each one is talking, and everybody's crying. Now, obviously, when they're looking at you, they're seeing a skinny kid. You want to be with them. So everybody's crying, and they're crying over here, they're crying over. And then as soon as the 5th one comes, they move you out. So you wait all week for 1 hour. And as a child, you have no sense of time. And then what was terrible, as I still remember, when you go back, for the other children around you, their parents didn't come. So you wait all week, and they also didn't have write letters. You wait all week, and it's Sunday, you're all excited, nothing. Nobody came. Now usually when it was really that bad, nobody got visitors. And then suddenly I realized, the doctors can't help me, my parents can't help me, I have to help myself. I said, so I didn't even know the term, but really I was saying, hey, you got to be self-reliant. It's you or nothing. What made things worse is that many, many children died because you had a severe contagious disease, and when they died, it was almost always, as I remember, during the night. Because when you woke up, the bed next to you had clean sheets. And you said to the nurse, where's Billy? He went home. Where's Mary? So clean sheets meant somebody had died. Because when children are in the bed, it's all wrinkled. And so I began in my mind to say, I never want my bed to have clean sheets. I always want it to be wrinkled. And I had dreams for years after I got out about beds having wrinkled sheets, and the nurse, in my mind, the nurse trying to make it clean. I said, no, 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 no. And then, so really, we knew, all the children knew that when the nurse said they're going home, they died. But you couldn't say that. So it was a conspiracy, us and the nurses, to deny death. You know, so little kids were denying death. Oh, we're happy, we hope they'll write to us, I hope they'll come back and see us. But I knew in my mind, you know, kids are dying, this one, this one, this one. I said, I don't want to die. I mean, I'm too young. So what I did was, I said, I didn't say I am self-reliant. I said, okay, I'm going to have to count on God. There was a spiritual force up there. So every day in the morning I would pray, bless me God, make me strong and healthy and smart and courageous, and I'll be good. I'll be obedient when I get home. I'll do chores around the house. It's a routine. If I close my eyes, I go through it again. And so then it was the day. The problem now, lights out. And there's shadows all around. And so here's the devil. Because I couldn't believe that the God is going to kill children. There's no concern. So the devil is coming to pick the children for that night. And so I doubled my chances of survival. At night I would pray to the devil. Hello, devil. I'm sorry you're coming here. It's probably a boring job. If you have to take some children, don't take me. There's a lot of other kids around here. And I still feel guilty about them because I said, you know, it's me or them. Somebody's got to go. So I hate to say, I'd rather be them than me. And then I pulled a sheet over my head, and I literally went into like a deep trance. Next thing I know, it's morning. I get up, hey, thank God, thanks. And I did this for 6 months. I was there for Christmas, Easter, New Year's, my birthday. And then finally, it was Easter in America is like, I don't know, it was this time early in April. And I can remember the nurse coming and saying, good news, you're going home. I started to cry, meaning I thought she said, oh, you're about to die. I said, no, she said, no, you're going to go home. I jumped out of bed and I crumbled to the floor. Because in 6 months, I never exercised. Muscles all atrophied. You think about how crazy, why would they make us stretch? Nothing in those days. They put me in a wheelchair when I got home. And the most wonderful thing was, it's now April. I come in the house, a little apartment, and there's a big Christmas tree, all brown, because it was there for Christmas. And my brothers, my 2 brothers and sister, were embarrassed to have their friends. My mother said, we're not taking it. I get emotional. We're not taking it down.
It's beautiful.
Until Philip comes back.
It's beautiful.
Really amazing.
It's wonderful.
And so essentially, so at the end of that, I said, okay, I survived the worst. I mean, the worst experience. And then I said, if you survive that, then maybe I'm immortal. I don't think I'm never going to die, which is okay. If the choice is, so I said, well, if you're going to be immortal, you got to do good things. I mean, you can't just hang around the streets. So it's very young. I said, okay, I have to pay back God. I mean, you know, He made me survive.
Yes.
So I said, okay, I'm going to do good things with my friends, with my family, and stuff.
This is what really this is the question, where it comes from. You know, sometimes when people have some bad life, or I don't know, they become criminals or they become really violent, we used to look at their childhood and we see some suffering, and sometimes it's opposite. So what is the moment when what decides if from the suffering one become strong and want to do good, and one become somehow weaker and is suffering for his life?
It's a good question. See, but I think when you're a child and the suffering is produced by people against you, that you have parents who beat you up or abuse you, or in some cases parents sexually abuse children, is that then in your mind you always want revenge, but you're too little.
Yes.
But now I get strong, and so I still have in my mind the power of revenge. In my case, it was the opposite, because I was able to say, God chose me to survive. My mother had faith that I would survive with the Christmas tree symbol. My brothers, everybody was happy to see me come home. So it was, my suffering was caused by disease,
yes,
whatever that
not
is.
by people.
Not by people.
And for those who suffered because of other people, what could be the reveal, the way out?
Well, see, then the other work I have done, and I didn't make it clear in the inspiration form, is about the psychology of time perspective. Is that, again, being in the hospital, you know, stuck in this negative experience, imagining things are going to get better, but you didn't really believe it truly. But so I developed a psychological scale called the Zimbardo Time Perspective Inventory, ZTPI. And it measures the degree to which each person lives in the future, lives in the past, or lives in the present. And then for some people who are focused on the past, they only focus on the bad things. Regret what I should have done, failure, abuse, terrible things. Other people, when they think of the same thing, think my happy birthday when I was 16, my best friends, the vacations we took. And so those people call past positive or past negative. People who live in the present either could be present fatalists, meaning if you're poor, it doesn't pay to plan for the future, nothing works. Mm-hmm. It's my poverty, or if you're a Muslim, Allah provides the fate for you. Or you could be present hedonist, that is, you live for joy, you live for pleasure, you live for novelty, you live for sensation, you're always seeking exciting things. And so those are two different ways to be present. And future is, what do I have to do now to make my life better tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And what do I have to avoid, what temptation I have to avoid, because the risk is too great. If I do it, I could get addicted to this drug, or I could go to jail. And another way to be future-oriented is, we call it transcendental future, meaning I'm going to live my life as a good person, because when I die, I will go to heaven. Now, so most people who become educated are future-oriented. Education is all about teaching children, all children are present-oriented, because you live in this time zone. But education leads you to think, if you study hard, you get promoted. If you get promoted, you go to the next grade. If you go to the next grade, you go to a better school. You get a better school, you get the best job. So all of education is to train children to be future-oriented. So learning how to resist temptation is almost impossible if you're present hedonistic, because it's there. It's, I mean, you know, you smell it, you taste it, right? It's just one. If you're future-oriented, you look at the thing and say, I would like it, but no. Because if it's really that good, why would I stop? Yes. You know, if smoking is so good, why would I stop? If drinking vodka is good, why would I stop? Drinking beer, you know.
And so, if it's not good, then why starting?
Yeah. So if you're future-oriented, you're able to step out of the situation, look at it. And I look at people, I say, oh my God, look at my friends, you know, doing these things, they're going to get in trouble, they're going to go to jail, and surely they do. So one of the big issues has always been in religion, who gives in to temptation, who resists? And for me, there's a clear answer. People who are present, hedonistic, rarely can resist temptation. They are drawn in like a magnet. And people who are future-oriented, they depolarize the magnet. It's not going to affect me. And again, you realize, I say, in the Lord's Prayer, what we say all the time, what? Lead us not into temptation, yes. Deliver us from evil. You know, so again, you're depending on God to do it, and say, no, it's got to be here. Yes. It's got to be, you have to decide, I will not do this, even though it looks good, it feels good, it tastes good.
Okay. It seems to me that there are people who are born as heroes. It seems to be that it's somewhere inside, and you think that we can learn people to be heroes.
Yes.
How?
No, I think there are some people, I don't know if you want to say born to be heroes, but almost from the beginning have a mission in life to help people, to be willing to suffer, and to organize their whole life around service to humanity. And we have these examples. So here's Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa. So we know their name because they are lifelong heroes. But they're rare. That's why we know their name. I mean, we have one from this. What I'm arguing is that ordinary people all the time do heroic deeds. One here. We don't know about them because they only do one. And the media is not there to cover the good deed. Because again, the media only covers the negative. And so my idea was we should honor ordinary heroes whose actions are extraordinary, but they're ordinary people. They're not more smart, they're not more educated, they're not more compassionate, but in a certain situation, they're able to step back and say, this is right and this is wrong. Not only will I do the right thing, I will encourage other people to do it with me. And so, with that idea that heroes can be trained, and heroes are ordinary people, children can be heroic if we give them a vision. So the idea is, how do you inspire people to be willing to go take the heroic path? And then how do you train them? It's not enough to say, do it. Say, what does it mean to be a hero? Well, it means understanding right and wrong. It means having the knowledge to say, in every situation, what are the barriers to doing good things? Sometimes the barrier is in me. Okay, a child is drowning. I want to jump in and say, I don't know how to swim. So I'm not going to do that. Sometimes the barrier is I'm too small. There's a big person lying in an accident. I can't lift him up. But what do I do? Sometimes it's in the situation so that there's many people around and nobody does anything. So then it's the bystander effect. Yes. So now, I ordinarily, if I was alone, would do something. The situation makes me not do something. Sometimes, so I'm saying it's the person, awareness, system, situation. Sometimes it's the system in which, in China, for example, if I help someone in an emergency, they could sue me and say, you caused it. And they almost always win. So in China, people rarely help. Even though it's clear. I mean, somebody's lying. There was a video 2 years ago of a little girl, 2 years old, was run over by a car. Was lying there, and there's a surveillance video. 12 people passed by within 1 foot of her. No one stopped to pick her up. And then a truck ran over her and finally killed her. and many people, it made the news all over China. Many people said, I would not help because they would blame me. So there we have to change the system to say, you have to have what's known as the Good Samaritan law. If you try to help somebody in need, you cannot be sued. You know, so that, and therefore you lower the barrier against doing nothing. Yes. Say, now you should do something.
There was a study trying to find out what kind of people helped Jews during the Second World War. And they thought that it would be about education, that the most educated people would help and, you know, hide Jews against the Hitler. And then they found out it's not true. So they were trying to find other connections. Who are these people? Like, what they have in common? And they found out in this study that it's a lot about if these children are beaten or not. This was one very interesting result. And what do you think about, you know, who are the heroes? Who are these people who really risk their lives and maybe lives of their children to save somebody?
Yeah, I think what the little bit I know about research on ordinary people who risk their lives to save Jews, in many cases they came from families where the family always had clear moral values. So it didn't matter if you were educated, and it didn't matter if you could argue around it. It says, no, the world is filled with good and evil, and everybody could be tempted to either one, but for the people you respect, like parents or teachers, it should also be religious people, they make evident, they make clear that you should have a moral conscience, independent of what other people say. Because people are always going to say, do this, and give you what is a good reason for them. And you have to be able to step back, press the pause button, and say, what are they telling me to do? Who is it good for? Will anyone be hurt? Will it cause any suffering? Will it diminish the quality of human life? And if it does, no matter what they say, I say no. I refuse to go, I refuse to do it, I refuse to sign, I refuse to vote for you. And that's really, so that same message now, I think for me it's true now, especially in Eastern Europe and in America, is that too many politicians and too much media are really focusing on the negative, focusing on the fear. So we do things not because we want good things to happen. We do things because we don't avoid bad things. That's terrible. I mean, so when you're raising children, you want to raise children to say, I would like to have my children to grow up in an ideal world. I would like my children to have a good job. First, a good education, a good job. I want my children to feel loved by the parents. I want them to have friends. I would like them to have a career which is they enjoy, and what they do makes the world better. That's ideally for every parent. And so what can I do now, when my child is 6 years old, to help put them on that path?
Yes.
And so what parents do is they have to model. So that is, children know the difference when you say one thing. So you have to be consistent. You have to do what you say. So again, I talked earlier about role models, so that parents are role models for their children. And so little things you say or do that you think are insignificant, they know, they're observing it. All they have is when they're little, it's mother and father, if there's both. And so things you say, or you're on the telephone, having an argument with your husband or with your family, that registers with them. And so when you say, oh, you have to be a good person, they say, Mama, I heard you say the neighbor is not trustworthy. I heard you say women can't trust men. You know, so for me that's really important. Is that for parents to have high moral standards, to make clear to children what are good things to do, what are bad things to avoid doing, and then you be the model of what you say.
It's something which should be taught in schools, like instead of one lesson of mathematics during the week. I imagine that this could be a wonderful thing, you know, to have one lesson of heroism every week.
Yeah, so again, it would be a simple thing where you give the children an example. You know, here's a child, his fell down, hurt his legs, nose is bleeding, and other children. So what should you do? You should help. Well, what are situations where you don't help? Well, maybe two children are fighting, and you're little. But what should you do? You call the teacher. You call the police. So the idea is you always do something. But we teach you do the right thing and the wise thing. So always step back, analyze the situation. There's an incredible story in New York 3 years ago. On a subway station in New York, everybody rides a subway. It's very inexpensive, it goes everywhere. And you know trains come in every 3 minutes. Okay? So on a subway station in New York, there are 75 people. There's a white man, dizzy. He has a seizure. He falls down across the tracks. You know that the train is going to cut him in 3 pieces. Okay? The 75 people, they all look down, nobody does anything. At that moment, an African-American man comes on the station with his 2 children. He sees this, he looks over, he knows this is the bystander effect, nobody's going to help. He turns to a stranger and says, take care of my children. He jumps down on the track. Now it's a big guy. So he picks the guy up and puts him between the tracks. And he lays on top and he pushes him down. And at that moment, the train goes over his head. There's only this much clearance from the top of his head to the bottom of the train. If the man breathed, it would decapitate him. So his name is Wesley Autry, and there's a wonderful video of it. So they call him superhero of the subway. Now, what he did was impulsive heroism. But what he did was not wise. Because imagine if the man moved and he was decapitated, what would the children see? They would see their father with his skull torn up. They would never get over it. The next week in New York, you know, his story made a video. The same thing happened. Somebody who had seen the video jumped down, picked the guy up, said, I need help. Brought him, 2 people picked him up, they all got up, they all went to work. Okay. So this is a wise hero who reacts to the situation but not impulsive. So that's what we teach. We give examples like that.
Wonderful.
To be wise and effective, but never to risk your life.
Yes, wonderful.
So we hope.
I start tonight by saying my children, you know, some story about one hero you told me about, and I start my private heroic lessons. Yeah. So again, talk and say, what would you do? Yes. You know, so again, it's not just tell. See, the problem you usually hear is that you tell the whole story. It was nice, and you know, you go and then, what would you do? What would you do? Yeah. Nejsilnějším momentem pro mě byla jeho vzpomínka na rok 1939, kdy mu bylo 5 let a bojoval se zápalem plic, což byla v té době mimořádně nebezpečná nemoc. Se stovkami dalších dětí strávil malý Filip Zimbardo mnoho dní v nemocnici na jižním Manhattanu, v místě, jaké bychom si dnes představovali už jen neradi. A já se to místo nakonec vypravila navštívit.